All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Synced Movies and Television with Matty and Stephen. I am Stephen as usual, and to my left here we got good old
Matty.
All right. And we have watched 3,000 Years of Longing for you to tell you how it is and whether or not you should go see it. I do think you'll be thoroughly surprised by our answer. Maybe not surprised, but hopefully nourished by our delectable voices and our delicious reviews.
Mm.
So 3,000 Years of Longing, starring Idris Elba, Tilda Swinton, directed by George Miller of Mad Max, Fury Road, and Mad Max fame, also of Babe, Pig in the City, and Happy Feet.
Mm.
All classics in their own right.
Yeah.
Um, so I guess I'll just get started here with our general thoughts section. And this is just where we break down how we feel initially about it and whether or not we think you should watch it if you don't want to hear any of our kind of spoilery talk. We've been doing some spoilers here and there in the other categories, but kind of keeping things played to the chest just so we don't really ruin the experience for you. But here in general thoughts, we'll just kind of get out our general thoughts. So I'll go first. I really, really enjoyed this movie. I thought it was quite good. Any movie where you have like humans communicating with any type of god or ancient spirit or something from like mythological or folklore type settings, I always really enjoy. Idris Elba plays a jinn, which is like a like I guess like an Arabic demon of sorts, or spirit or mystical being, also a genie, which a lot of times they've kind of transmuted into genies or known as being genies. So he does grant 3 wishes, and his whole thing is he gets rubbed out of a lamp by Tilda Swinton, who plays a solitary character who is a literary scholar and narrative something else she calls herself. But she likes books. She likes spending her time alone. She doesn't like really need the whole rest of the world in order to feel content or feel happy. So it's a really interesting juxtaposition of characters between these two, where one is there to fulfill her heart's greatest desire, but she also is conflicted because it seems like she doesn't really contemplate or ponder what her heart's desires are regularly and feels just content with the way things are, being alone.
Mm-hmm.
So that being said, a little synopsis for you. I really loved it. I thought it was a completely artistic, beautiful movie. It had some astonishing imagery and scenes that I just couldn't believe I was watching in a movie. I think this is on my list of probably top 4, top 5 so far this year. Idris Elba was great. Tilda Swinton was great. God, what else can I say? I'm kind of jumbled about it. I think definitely you should go out and see this movie. Give it some money, especially in the age of the superhero. You might be surprised. On the surface, it kind of looks like a weird magical rom-com or something from the poster, but it actually holds many great secrets for the discerning movie fan. Go ahead, Maddie. How are you feeling about it so far? Yes.
I don't know where George Miller went for so long and why it took him so long to make a new movie after Fury Road, and how much I really wanted another Mad Max, but man, this movie is so great. Idris Elba knocking out of the park again. We just did our Beast review, kills it there. Tilda Swinton always
Yep.
kills it, everything that she's in. I mean, I just didn't know what to expect. I saw a trailer and I read a little synopsis on IMDb like the other day that was like she reads stories and like basically knows a lot about mythology and opens this gin bottle and has
Mm-hmm.
to deal with this. And I was like, I don't really know what I'm getting into. But honestly, just from the trailer and the visual feast that I was seeing through the trailer, I'm there. I don't care what it's about. I was just ready to watch a George Miller because he's making
Right.
movies that no one else will make or is gonna make. And I don't
Absolutely.
know, I don't understand how a studio goes, yeah, go ahead and make that. Because I feel like every time you talk to any other director, it's like it's so hard to get movies made. But George Miller's like, I'm gonna make a movie based off a short story that no
Okay.
one's really probably going to care about. um,
Right. I'm gonna see if I can pull
but
up the short story.
it was visually it's a visual feast, and that's what I want from him. I think that's what Fury Road was. Can't wait for Furiosa. On his
Yeah.
IMDb, there's an untitled Mad Max project, so give me all of it, whatever George wants to make. I do want to
Yeah.
say though, after seeing a lot of the magic in this movie. Please let this guy direct a Justice League Dark movie. Idris Elba's as Swamp
Yeah.
Thing, doing the voice and being the Doctor.
Oh,
That's what I want
whoa.
to happen. Um,
Wow. That's huge.
you know, I just
Um,
I think that would be super cool, and I think Idris just like in mocap, just like his movements would
yeah.
be great. Just
He'd
seeing
be
him as the Djinn
incredible.
and some of the stuff he did in this current and this George Miller movie. I think George Miller should make a Justice League Dark movie.
Heard that. Yeah, it's actually based upon the short story The Djinn in the Nightingale's Eye by A.S. Bryant. I didn't stick around the credits to figure that out at all, but I felt like some literary adaptation. But yeah, the magical stuff in this was quite good. And just the locales and the settings, the scenarios that we get transported to through the Jinn telling his tales, his 3,000 years of longing, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Um, some of that stuff, I didn't really know what I was in for.
Yeah.
And some of the visuals, some of the creatures that we see, especially in that first story with Queen of Shiva and King Solomon and
Mm-hmm.
everything, some of that was so wild,
That dude.
and people like you just don't even know. With that being
Mm-hmm.
said, we'll move into our execution and storytelling category. I think, like we just kind of mentioned, George Miller, he's a master. I think a master director. I think
Mm-hmm.
there's probably a couple moments that we had talked about off camera that maybe felt a little bit choppy, maybe a little bit clunky, some fade outs and stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that are kind of take you out of it for a little bit. But other than that, some of the visual ideas, the feast, if you will, that we're getting here that Maddie mentioned are just astounding. And overall, the storytelling, I have a big gripe generally with like voiceover storytelling and just like somebody telling you what things are and where things are going. But because the setting of this film is about storytelling initially or
Mm-hmm.
inherently, um, you know, that didn't bother me or anything like that. And I just sat and I listened to the Jin tell his story. But also, it opens with Tilda Swinton's character, Althea, telling her story. And I love how she opens it and says, like, there's no way you'd believe me if I told this just like a regular ho hum by the water cooler
Yeah.
story. I have to tell it like it's a fairy tale, and it truly sets you up for the magical aspects of things. And right out the gate, we get some incredible, startling imagery of her starting to have these hallucinations, I guess we'll call them,
Yeah.
of folkloric kind of like entities and spirits, if you will. And how'd you feel about the storytelling execution
Um,
aspects?
so I don't really mind the voiceover stuff, and I think this movie leads to it because like, that's probably how the short story kind of plays out. Is it's probably very
Right.
similar dialogue, and I think sometimes when you're adapting a novel like this or a short story, sometimes the best thing to do is just follow it. And that's probably what they did. I haven't read the short story. Maybe it's totally different. I'm just talking at my ass
Right.
right now, but I didn't mind it. I feel like like you said, it's a movie about storytelling. So I love that she sets us up with like, I'm going to kind of tell you this story like a fairy tale. It gets you ready
Right.
for what you're about to witness. And some of the amazing imagery and creatures and things. And I think the only thing that really bugged me was towards the end, just those fade outs to black, those kind of
Mm-hmm.
false endings sometimes directors give you where it's like, you're like, oh, okay, that was a cool ending. Like, it leaves a lot open and I can think about it. And then it's like, oh, no, 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 we're not done yet. There's no credit. I
Yeah.
feel like it did that like two or three times. And that sometimes can get me. But honestly, it's just nice to see George Miller back at it, making,
Yeah.
to me, film that no one else is making. I can't tell you. The only thing I can kind of compare this to is Tarsim's Cell,
Nice. I got
something like
another.
that. And I don't see. I feel like only '90s movies did that, and no longer do we get that. Really, this
Sure.
is kind of fantastical with like great costumes and just putting us in these other worlds, even if it's like got a weird made up creature on the steps. I don't even know what the fuck that thing was. Anyway, yeah, it's just I love that George Miller's just such a madman that he's like, yeah, fucking put it in
Yeah.
there. Who gives a shit? It's a
Yeah.
fairy tale. And I love that, and I don't feel like enough people are doing that these days. They're not, and maybe
Yeah.
that's because studios won't let them, or they're playing it too safe. But I love that there's a madman like George Miller still going, nope, this is the movie I'm making. You
Yeah.
better let me make it. And they let him do it, and it's great.
Yeah. It almost makes me sad that he's like a bit of an older gentleman because I'm like, man, I want like 3,000 more films of longing from you, buddy. Like,
Yeah.
he's so good. I think Mad Max Fury Road is an absolute masterpiece.
Hmm.
And I got another Tarsum Singh for you. This one reminded me a lot of Immortals. Is it called
Oh yeah.
Immortals? Yeah,
Yeah.
Immortals with Henry Cavill. If you have
Yeah.
not seen that movie, we're in a weird space gap where, like, Maddie and I are still young men, but we're pushing 40.
Mm.
We're approaching 40. And, I just can't help but think that there's probably a lot of young folk out there who, like you said, Maddie, like, probably don't know about a wealth of like fantastical and really visually rich 90s films. So definitely check out pretty much any Tarsum Singh movie. And I know I'm
Yeah.
saying that name to you, and some of you, maybe our younger viewers, are like, who the flip is Tarsum Singh? Google that shit. Thank me
Yes.
later. But yeah, this reminded me kind of that, because you're dealing with like gods, and you're dealing with like I absolutely loved at the very beginning where they're speaking Greek to one another,
Hmm.
and then how he learns English really quickly, and how he's sucking info off of computer screens and off the bookshelf, and it's just at the touch of his fingers.
Yeah.
So great. um, which will lead us into characters. The Tilda Swinton character, she's so wonderful, bookish, if you will, a literary scholar. She's not to be bothered. I always kind of respect this type of personality in real
Hmm.
life. Anybody
Yeah.
who doesn't give me the time of day, I'm like, mad respect, because I
Yeah.
know I can be kind of annoying in my social interactions. Maybe not annoying, but I don't know, whatever. But she played this character quite well, as she does with every character. But also, like, she's playing this like nerdy kind of looking character, but the whole movie is like, deals with love. It's a love story. It's
Hmm.
many love stories, really. And so you start to see very quickly how beautiful she actually is, and how she fits into the overall scope of these love stories that are told by the jinn, and has a lot to do with how he's ended up in the bottle. There's some great comedic moments with these characters, but Idris Elba, he's amazing as this jinn, as this genie, and his accent is really nice. It seems like he probably had a dialect coach help him kind of really get some authenticity there. And guy's just a fantastic actor to begin with. And Tilda Swinton, she
Yes.
just showed up, and she's just like, where do I go? Just tell me when action is, and boom, she blows your mind.
Yeah.
She's always great. Another movie it reminded me of was the what is it called? The Last Lovers Left Alive, or
Only
something
lovers
like
left alive.
Only
The
Lovers Left Alive. Yeah, it's very similar in that way, where they're kind of,
Jarmusch.
yeah, Jarmusch, where they're name dropping different mythological characters and stuff. I just love that. It's very Neil Gaiman-y. It felt like
Hmm.
Sandman even a little bit. So I'm glad we're getting more stuff like that. We need to put the youth, as well as the not the youth, but the general audiences, back in touch with mythological characters, and see where these
Hmm.
archetypes flow through our current media, which is something they touch on in the movie. Like, George Miller knows what he's doing. He
Yeah.
makes a very clear reference to like how comic book characters are our current mythological archetypes and all that kind of thing.
Hmm.
How'd you feel about the characters in this movie?
I just real quick, the performance. I love it because they're in bathrobes for most of the movie.
Yeah, right.
And to me, you could almost just put a camera up and let Tilda Swinton and Idris Elba get into these characters and do a play of the same story and just listen to them talk about it. I mean, the visual
Absolutely.
feast is great, but I think just their acting and the way they deliver the stories, like the way Idris like delivers his stories that he's telling and the pain that he's felt because he's been around forever, but he's stuck in a bottle. And what would that fit? It just was great. I could have watched a play of this with no visual,
Yeah,
with maybe like puppets in the background reacting or trying to tell the story
that's
or something
brilliant.
crazy. But like with George Miller, he's going to show you these time periods. He's going to put you there. He's going to make you care about things. He's going to show you weird stuff.
Yeah,
I don't. Tilda Swinton's great and everything. I don't think we need to like. I mean, yes, give her all the praise
yeah,
that you need to give her, but she's amazing. And Idris is just, man, I don't know. When he gets on screen, there's just something about him that he's like, I'm a Jin. I'm like, I believe you. Like
yeah,
if he walked past me after that, I'd be like, Jin. He's like, no, I'm just a real dude. I'm
yeah.
like, no,
No,
you're a
grant me
magical
my
being. I'm
wishes.
scared of you.
I have
Like
a wish.
yeah, yeah. It's just he's just so commanding, and I think she is as well. To go up against a being that's older than she could ever imagine to be, and like talk to him like a person, and there's just like it reminded me of a play, man, and I was just
Yeah,
sucked in,
that's very
and
cool.
I thought it was great. All the other performances, people playing people from history, was great. I mean, a lot of the time they don't talk or it's in another language, and it's very,
Hmm.
more body movement, more facial expressions. A lot of the time, I did think the third time he gets put in the bottle, that actress was really good.
Yeah,
I don't know her name, and I
she was
apologize. Um,
Jafira, I believe. She was like the inventor girl.
yeah, I thought
Yeah,
I loved that whole thing of.
Jafira, I think.
Yeah, I can't remember. I mean, this is a movie that I will watch many times and I will know every character at some point, but, this is
Right.
still pretty fresh. But I really like that scene. Yeah, this movie's
Find
just
it.
great and the performances are great.
Yeah.
Even from the people who aren't really like known actors, and who knows if they were actually even actors at all or just buddies of
Yeah.
George Miller's. So he's like, get in there, do this scene. I feel like he's
Yeah.
just such a off the cuff kind of director that he would probably just pull people from. Because I just heard that real quick that in Furiosa he cast this person that was bullied a lot and got on the news, and that he put because they were
Whoa.
quote unquote ugly or whatever,
Right.
and he
Yeah.
put him in Furiosa just because of and that's awesome.
Yeah.
So,
Threads of this movie, he addresses kind of the beauty standards and different types
mhm,
of beauty and that kind of thing, and
yeah,
it's really quite genius. And yeah, he has a way of weirding you out, but also
oh,
like
he's a weird dude.
inducing the feeling of awe. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
were you done with the
Oh,
your
no, no,
assessment of this
I'm
part
I'm good. I
before
think
I
I'm good, man. I just love
yeah
it. Performance is
yeah
great.
I thought, some of the standouts to me were the Sultan kind of story of the young boy with the sword and how
Hmm.
he grew up to be like this bloodlusting warlord, and how his younger brother became like, he never seemed to really grow up, but like was
Hmm.
had to produce male heirs because they thought the older brother was dead at this point, I think, and
Hmm.
how he believed that, like the more flesh of the surface area of the person meant more like enjoyment or whatever. So you have
Hmm.
these really good scenes of like, plus size women and these really exotic and beautiful things, and throughout the entire movie there was a lot of stuff that really evoked these ideas of like ancient customs
Hmm.
cultural things that, it just had to be so wild to live in certain time periods, especially like ancient Egypt or ancient Arabia, these, the Far East before the West was even established with societies and this kind of thing. Just, and they make a point to also point out that we needed like a lot of different stories, fantastical stories, in order to make sense of the world, because we didn't
Hmm.
have like scientific understanding of things. And truly it had to be quite magical back in the days, quite scary as
Yeah.
well, to exist in some of these ancient civilizations with, all that we know now and all the technology that we have. There's just some wild shit we got to see. Go
I
ahead.
love that idea of we needed stories to tell us like what was actually happening, because I feel like we have a lack of that now, of these
Yeah.
stories
Yeah.
anymore. These fantastical stories, like everything's so set in a reality, or you can't watch it if it doesn't make sense. Or and I feel like George Miller. That's what this movie is.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so in the like special effects stunts and some of these visuals that we're kind of talking about, one thing that really hooked me like right at the beginning was that first story of Shiva and King Solomon, the court, Shiva's court
Yeah.
of royalty. They were incredible. All these different types, like I think I saw a minotaur in there, like some recognizable type of characters, like
Mhm.
an Anubis kind of looking character,
Yeah.
but also these wild, like alien looking creatures that were scattered all about. And it just
Yeah.
evoked this sense of like, we don't really know anything about those ancient times. Not to say that maybe these creatures were real, but in a sense that the jinn is real in this film, and some of these
Hmm.
mythological creatures and characters actually did exist around that time for them in this world. It was
Hmm.
just so wild. And there's one character in the background that, like, let's see if I can do it. He was just like a brutish character, and his neck was out like kind of
Oh
all the
yeah,
way.
I know. Yeah.
And it's just like it's just like just these notions. I gotta believe that I gotta believe that this movie is like exactly what George Miller was seeing while reading this story or dreaming
Yeah.
it, because it's just wild, man. It's so wild. The CG stuff, all that stuff, all your Hollywood kind of special effects are just handled so masterfully. I mean, if you've
Hmm.
seen Mad Max Fury Road and see how he's able to weave in his practical stuff with his non-practical stuff, he just wields it like a maestro, man. And it makes you feel the magic. You really believe in the magic all the way till the end, even when Idris's character is kind of suffering there, and you get
Hmm.
like some strange clues and strange symptoms as to his agony, I'll say. But yeah, how did you feel about that kind of stuff, the believability of all these scenarios and effects and everything?
I loved it all. I mean, there was some like green screen stuff that was like needed to be done, but green screen it's always something that I can like kind of see. Just we've been trained at this point, as many
Right.
films as we've watched, to see, but it doesn't take you out of it. I mean, it's like an effect that has to be used for certain to get an effect that you want out of uh, a scene sometimes, and that didn't take me out of it by any means, but I did notice it.
Mm-hmm.
um, I think my favorite special effects scene was when it's the first story where he gets no, it's the second time he gets put in the bottle and it's hidden, the boy
Mm-hmm.
with the sword. But before that, but he tries to go after this girl who's made her wish,
Mm.
um, and I don't want to give anything away, but it's a very like horror movie scene. And
Yeah.
the thing that drops out of this guy that is in this guy's head is something of like eldritch horrors, and I
Okay.
was just like,
Right.
yes, this is
Yeah.
cool. I don't know if that's what he was alluding to, but it was very Cthulhu, like
Mm-hmm.
something with tentacles in its mouth and several eyes, and I was like, oh my god, he's kind of drawing from all kinds of
Right.
mythology, like stuff from ancient times to more current stuff, which I thought was
Yeah.
really awesome. I kind of wish he would dove a little more into that eldritch horror, but that's what I always want, and it's not my movie.
You're right. Yeah.
But I love that scene. I just really feel like it was like it's the most horror scene in the movie, and kind of
Mm-hmm.
jolted me a little bit because I'm a seasoned horror veteran at this point, but it was kind of
Right.
creepy when the guy crawled on the wall. I was like, whoa, what's going on here? And then when it dropped, it was just I would love to see George Miller take on like a some kind of horror story or something that hasn't been done yet, or like
Yeah.
a Lovecraft story, but
Ryla.
put his own spin. Yeah, put his own spin on it or something, because we all know Lovecraft was not a great person. So probably got to update
Yeah.
that for the times.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I agree. And actually, you saying that makes me be like, oh yeah, totally. Like maybe if not directly pulling from some of that Lovecraft stuff, these
Hmm.
creatures, like it doesn't just speak to like the arcane mythologies that we're familiar with, like Egypt and ancient Arabia and stuff like that, like kind of familiar with from some of our lore, but also, pulling from possibly literary things. It's very much about the literary aspects of life, and the as lore develops, it stops, not that it stops, but it evolves from being just lore into being literature, we'll
Hmm.
say. And so that's interesting. I didn't even think of that. But when you think back to some of these creatures that you see, like they're quite alien and quite creepifying.
Well, I think for me, it seemed the story is a fairy tale, and it's pulling from all these stories. She's heard all these.
Hmm.
She's like, "Well, are you?" She keeps on calling the Jinn a trickster. Are you trying to trick me into these wishes? She's like,
Hmm.
"I've read all these stories." So, knowing her and being someone who's like all about solitude, and she reads a lot, she's probably read a lot of things, and
Right.
I think George Miller was trying to throw in all of that he could to just make it more fantastical, and I think it
Hmm.
helped the movie. Honestly, I think if in Egypt I would have just seen normal Egyptians, I would have been like, oh, okay, that's a cool scene. But having a weird thing on the steps, and then like Anubis in the corner, and another weird
Hmm.
guy that showed up earlier in the movie on the side, that just makes me go, oh, I want to know what he's thinking. I want to watch the special features. I want him to break down all these scenes for me. Like, what was
Right.
he thinking? And then it's like, maybe I don't want to know. Maybe I just want to think about it and try to get in his head and what I think, why I would do that. So I love
Yeah.
movies like this. I love movies that make my imagination run wild.
Absolutely. That's a good way to put it, for sure. I think one character who's always kind of fascinated me throughout life and like my own treadings over mythology and stuff is King Solomon. So it was cool to
Yeah.
see this visualization, I guess, if you will, this representation of King Solomon in this film. And he does this musical performance thing with this really strange instrument that is just like unreal. Again, it's magical, it's fantastical, it's
Hmm.
awe-inspiring, but it's also off-putting in a way. It's magical and fantastical and beautiful, but also kind of off-putting and just so foreign to anything we consider commonplace. But to somebody like
Hmm.
the Queen of Sheba or King Solomon himself or this court of characters, it's all normal to them.
Hmm.
So normal can get as weird as George Miller can think, can
Yeah.
dream up that it can be. And watching the trailer for this movie, I think I only saw one trailer if there was any others.
Yeah.
I only saw one, and it kind of feels like a smaller film from the trailer, but it actually, I'm glad that there were surprises, and I'm glad I went in not having so many expectations, because it feels much bigger once you get into it, because then you're reminded pretty consistently that this is the director of Mad Max Fury Road,
Yeah.
which I think is just such a massive movie. Oops.
Yeah.
Um, so so yeah, I think there's just so much here to take in when you're watching it, and I think it's a solid two hour movie. It does feel
Hour
like maybe
46 minutes.
hey, there you go. That's great actually, because there's it's a lot of like it's a lot of listening to their stories and stuff, but you never really are
Hmm.
feeling like bored or like waiting for the end. There is the moments kind of near the end where it's like, is this the end? Oh, is this the end? But
Yeah.
but I think it's good, and it has, I think a really satisfying ending, because there's a moment at the very end of the third act where you're not quite sure where it's going to go. It could easily have been like more tragic, but
Hmm.
it speaks to, I think the Jinn says it well in the movie, like hope is, oh, what does he say, like hope is a demon or something like that, hope is a monster or something like that. But you sense those kind of things because throughout the movie, you hope that it ends well in a way for these characters, I would say. That all being said, we'll jump into our closing remarks on 3,000 Years of Longing. Great title, by the way. uh, i
Hmm.
think I think overall this film, it just is something that we don't get very regularly. And if you're a fan of even stuff like Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, or anything that has magical characters and creatures and story settings and things like that, if you're into older literature, or if you're like a seeker of secret arcane knowledge, what do they call it, esoteric kind of things,
Hmm.
it's got all that in it, and it serves it up in a nice, like Maddie said, a visual feast. But also the writing, the dialogue is really good. It's really well delivered by the actors. Performances are great. The directing is just wonderful. And, from minute one, I was in. I never felt myself like bored or like, looking away from the screen or trying to look at my phone or anything like that. I never felt like there were tedious moments in this movie. How about yourself?
I loved it. I thought it was good, man. I just
Yeah.
don't, like I said, I don't see a lot of movies like this anymore. And it's refreshing that people are still letting people make movies like this, or studios or producers find, someone, he presented this to someone and someone was like, oh, this is great. I love this
Yeah.
kind of movie. I'm glad those people are out there in Hollywood still letting these things be made. I think more of these things should be made. I
Hmm.
would recommend, if you don't watch the trailer, look at the poster. That's exactly what you're getting. Go watch
Yeah.
this movie with as little knowledge as possible. I mean, watch the trailer. I did. It doesn't really give anything away. It's just another visual feast that gives you like a little bit of like what the story is going to be about.
Hmm.
But I would recommend it if you're, I mean, just see it. I don't even think if you're bored, that's not, no, go see this over whatever the big release was of this week. I don't even know what that was. It might be
Yeah.
this. I don't know. It was the only thing that was on my radar
I
to go
think it's
see.
yeah, I think it's a movie that's equally rewarding if you watch it alone as well
Hmm.
as with maybe people you love. It's got a lot to say about solitary
Yes.
folks. It's got a lot to say about loneliness, but it also has a
Hmm.
lot to say about love and our connections to people. It's like just a beautiful movie, man. George Miller
Yeah.
fucking teed it up, knocked it out of the park,
So
I will
good.
say.
I will
Um,
say, out of everything that's been coming out this year, that I love that fantasy is making its return. Like we
yeah.
have The Sandman, 3,000 Years of Longing. We have a new Game of Thrones series, despite how you feel about it, or if you love it. We have the Lord of the Rings coming out. I love this resurgence, man. I
Me
love
too.
creatures. I love all that stuff. I want more fantasy.
Yeah.
Um,
Especially as the technology develops further and further, like we're able to achieve like some remarkable dreams on the big screen as well as the small
I
screen.
know I can't. It. I just real quick. It blows my mind that George Miller's making these like very bright, kind of crazy movies now. Like
Hmm.
I feel like it's right now, and he's so old, and that sucks. But it's like right now, his imagination can run wild, and I feel
Yeah.
like that's probably all he's wanted throughout his film career. And
Yeah.
I'm glad he can at least make some movies that he's maybe wanted to make for a long time now. And as he's getting older, and hopefully we get a few more before he passes, which inevitably we all have to do.
Yeah. I don't
But
think he's that old yet, but it's just like we're yearning for more. So it's like,
it just takes
oh,
him so long to make a goddamn film these days.
yeah,
I
exactly.
feel
So,
like I need more George Miller, man. He gets me. He makes the
yeah.
kind of films I like.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree. I agree. So that is our review of 3,000 Years of Longing. What Maddie was saying about like fantasy stuff just then, we're going to do like mid-season reviews of the Game of Thrones show, She-Hulk, as well as like
Hmm.
Reservation Dogs, stuff like that. There's just been a lot of movies to watch. We want to cover some television shows as well. So we're going to wait till like mid-season, probably Reservation Dogs, end of the season.
Hmm.
But I think we're going to jump on board of trying to knock down Rings of Power each episode and talk about that. But
Yeah.
definitely tons to watch and tons of really beautiful things.
Hmm.
I think the only thing that these kind of movies tend to run into, well, we'll say like these shows, because I think The Sandman, it might be really hard for it to get like a second season because of the money involved to
Hmm.
produce the first one and just like that awesome imagery. So, like let's continue. If you like this kind of stuff, let's continue to support it and
Hmm.
do our best to keep the fantasy alive. I will say we got a
Yeah.
Willow show coming out as well. I hope that's
Hmm.
good. I like Willow quite a bit. But anyway, thank you for watching this episode and sticking with us once again for another review. Please go see 3,000 Years of Longing. Support these actors as much as you can. 2 Idris Elba movies made it to my
I
list of
know.
top 5 this
Love
year
it.
so far, and that's great. I love the guy. Tilda Swinton, fantastic. If you'd like to engage with us on Instagram, that's our handle right there at Saint
Hmm.
Movies TV. Come leave us some comments on YouTube as well if you're watching these reviews. I hope you're enjoying them. Also, if you notice some of our technical aspects are kind of weird, like volumes and stuff, please do chime in and let us know. With the platform we're using right now, it can be hard for us to monitor what those levels are like. So, any critique, criticism, even if you want to tell us we're shitheads and we suck, it's welcome. I love
Yeah.
it.
Shout out to Brock at Rogue Yeti for
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
technical difficulty
Appreciate it
coordinator.
on our Sandman episode.
Yeah. And that's
that is
3,000 years. Saint!
There it is. All right, we'll catch you in the next review, folks.